You know what's crazy? I would guarantee that if I asked the question to my audience, why do you think so many studios shut down? Why do you think there were so many layoffs? Why do you think so many games had failed? I would guarantee that the vast majority of you would be able to answer that question without any issue. But the funny thing is that apparently, well, everybody else is struggling to figure out that answer. You know, 2024 was apparently the worst year in gaming. I know those incredible games that you played, those insane sales that we saw some of these games reach, those awesome indie hits that you play. Don't pay attention to any of that. None of that actually matters. What really matters is the layoffs and the mean things that people are saying on Twitter. We have journalists that are out there that are struggling. They are coping. They are grasping at straws, trying to figure out what happened to the industry, while at the exact same time, they are painting the audience as extremists because they didn't play the games or they criticized the games in a way that they didn't appreciate. You know, one of the biggest threats that we have across the entire industry, this is probably the same for other industries as well, but it's especially true for video games, is that we have a lot of people that are out there that want to purposefully misinterpret what player criticisms or customer criticisms are for their own virtue or agenda. And it is having a massive impact on this industry. How many times have you guys seen somebody say something along the lines of, this is exactly what they said? And they'll put quotations around something, but they're implying what somebody said, not actually directly quoting them. This disingenuous nature of conversation, debating, and arguing just doesn't work, and it's falling flat with audiences, and it's ruining the products that we're trying to buy. That's the reason why a lot of players are pushing back on it. You know, I'm not going to pretend like this doesn't happen on both ends. Of course, you're seeing that from the players. Of course, you're going to see some of that stuff from the audience. But the critical difference here is that the players are a diverse group. Diversity in opinions and perspectives and life and money and all kinds of different things. And they're going to have varying degrees of what their opinions are going to look like. And the difference between these two things is that the other side of that is an industry that seems like it is monolithically standing in opposition to its audience. But maybe I'm wrong. So today what we're going to do is we're going to find out why the players are the ones that are at fault for the fallout of 2024. As I sat in an airport waiting for my flight, excited to visit my family for the holidays, reflecting on how incredible of a year 2024 was for video games, I came across this article from TheWire.com titled 2024 was the year that the bottom fell out of the video game industry. From layoffs to the return of Gamergate, video games and the people who make and play them had a rough year. And I thought to myself, well, that's a tad dramatic. I mean, yeah, we saw some massive layoffs, cancellations, and closures across the industry, and it was arguably one of the most divisive years in gaming. However, 2024, while tumultuous, was an incredible year across the board. Indie games reached unheard of heights, and independent AA and AAA studios dominated the entire year. Steam updated their policies to protect their customers from rug-pulled DLC and roadmaps. California forced publishers and studios to plainly state that customers do not own what they are buying. 2024 was a step forward for consumers, but apparently that isn't where our priorities should be. Megan Farrakmanesh of TheWire.com writes, for the people who make games, 2024 was a year of holding on for dear life. At the annual Game Developer Conference in March, Survive Till 25 was this year's incantation, summoned to keep morale on pace. Others resorted to full-on screams as layoffs in the industry charted record highs and developers found themselves under attack online for conspiratorial nonsense. In 2023, more than 10,000 developers lost their jobs. 1/3 of game makers surveyed at the beginning of the year reported that they had been affected by layoffs in some way. While there were some wins for labor organizers at big studios like Activision Blizzard and collective action around fighting for protection from the encroachment of AI on employment, the industry's collective brain drain continued in 2024 as workers lost jobs en masse. 6 months in, and this year's layoff tally had already surpassed that of 2023. According to Matthew Ball, an advisor and producer for the games and television space, 2024's job loss count will wind up being about 40% higher than the previous years. The explanation is complex and wide-ranging for the same reasons the layoffs are so deep and continuous, and sit alongside many studio closures and even more canceled games, Ball says. Developers are under attack for conspiratorial nonsense, and they're trying to figure out why games are failing. You guys aren't seeing the correlation here? Let's look at the games and then look at the layoffs. Outside of Hi-Fi Rush, many of the studios that released games It fell flat with audiences. It fell flat for countless reasons that are pretty obvious to everybody else. Meanwhile, all of these publishers are investing obscene amounts of money into these projects. What do they think the recourse is for that money lost? When these studios and these publishers are investing $200 to $300 million into a single game, if not more, we're not even talking about marketing budget. Do you think that Microsoft is just going to accept the hit for Redfall, that Sony's just going to accept the $400 million wasted on Concord, that Ubisoft, who's been unable to turn a profit on damn near anything for years now, is somehow not going to have any repercussions for that? What's the conspiracy here? I am sick and tired of games media treating industry layoffs as some sort of surprise tragedy, conveniently ignoring the root cause that these companies failed to deliver on their customers' needs and the publishers over-budgeted on those projects and set unrealistic sales projections. The reality is simple. These players are not buying these games that are poorly made, uninspired, or designed for audiences that don't exist. Studios have spent years now chasing fleeting trends, pushing live service games that are riddled with microtransactions, and prioritizing their ideological messaging over the quality or meaningfulness of the content they're supposed to be delivering. When these games flop, it's no mystery why. There's no conspiracy here. This is an industry that's not under attack from external forces. It's sabotaging itself through greed, ego, and tone-deaf decision-making. You know, one of the other things that really bothers me is the special treatment that the games industry gets, the layoffs and closures. These aren't unique to just gaming. Every single industry is facing economic challenges right now because, well, people are facing economic challenges right now. The tech sector saw 141,000 jobs lost. Manufacturing saw 17,000 jobs lost. Retail, 4,800, and many more sectors saw the same. What is unique in gaming is that this is largely self-inflicted. Companies like Ubisoft, Microsoft, Sony, and more have consistently wasted their resources on bloated projects, garbage games, ideological soapboxes, and live service games that nobody was asking for, while ignoring their core audience. These layoffs are the inevitable result of poor leadership and decisions that were prioritizing quick profits and ego over player satisfaction. Studios aren't failing because of bad luck. They're failing because they've stopped making games that people care about. As a customer, I'm going to be honest, I just don't care or feel anything for any of these internal struggles that these companies go through, especially when it's mismanagement to blame. The industry's decline is a natural consequence of treating customers like an afterthought. If studios want to survive, well, they need to stop chasing trends, stop alienating their core audiences, and start focusing on making great games. The problem isn't the market or the players, it's the industry itself. Please show me an example of a studio, a great studio that released a successful game, that performed well day one, that sold really well, that delivered and exceeded players' expectations. They prioritized the players' needs, and then they ended up having layoffs. You can't. Because it doesn't exist, because successful games make successful studios, which keeps people in business. Why are we conveniently ignoring the fact that the studios that failed this year and even last year, well, I guess this year's 2025, 2024 and 2023 were because those games didn't sell. They made games that players didn't buy, and thus they went out of business, because that's just how the world works. You know, at the very least, I do feel for some of the developers that lost their job, because they're not the ones that are making the decisions that led to these studios having layoffs or closures, because it's not your audio engineer, it's not your level designer, it's not your animators or programmers, it's the leadership at these companies. But I will say this, as an employee at these studios, if you guys are out there and you're making video games today, you need to be paying attention to your leadership, and you have to recognize where that ship is going. If you're working for someone that you know is not doing a very good job of putting a video game together, you need to get out of there way before those layoffs come out. There is no way that there aren't people that were at, Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League and saying, "Oh man, we got a game of the year situation out here." No, there's no way you thought that. You got to recognize and know what the consequences of a game like that are going to look like for a studio. It's not going to be good. When I read articles like this, what really upsets me is how they perpetuate this idea of entitlement, that regardless of the outcomes, that people should keep their jobs. It's not their fault. It is. It's a collective thing, right? We're working as a team together to make this game and put it out there. And, well, if it doesn't sell, you lose your job, because that's just how it goes, especially with how much money's out there. And the issue is that when you start taking away, accountability, well, then they start looking around and saying, well, if it's not the leadership and it's not the industry, well, who would it be? The players. The writer continues with, as the industry faltered, games suffered. High-profile releases like Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League were commercial failures. While there were many reasons for this, online right-wing groups reduce it to a single mantra: go woke, go broke. By their logic, if a game does poorly and has even a whiff of diversity, be it regarding gender, sexuality, or race, that disappointing performance is the fault of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. Although there have been incredible games released this year, Balatro, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Metaphor ReFantazio, Astrobot, Black Myth Wukong, they couldn't distract from the troubles faced by the people making them. They couldn't make up for the fact that the meta-narrative of video games in 2024 was bleak. Ball says that the blame for this can't all be pinned to a single thing, like capitalism, mismanagement, COVID-19, or even interest rates. It involves development costs, how studios are staffed, consumer spending habits, and game pricing. The storm is so brutal, he says, because it's all of these things at once, and none have been really alleviated since the layoffs began. For indie developers specifically, the threat to their existence has been substantial. Dozens of small studios shuttered in 2024, though it's been difficult to get a full picture on how many indie studios the industry has lost, as they're more likely to shut down quietly without much fanfare or before many players even know they exist. With dwindling opportunities to get funding from investors and little cash to go around, developers sought alternative methods to get funding for their games in the past year. Some took bankrolling into their own hands. Among Us creator Innersloth launched an initiative to give fellow developers backing to finish projects. Others, like Tales of Kanzera Zhao developer Surgeon Studios, made their plans public in early development in hopes of attracting investments, all while fending off racist attacks from the anti-DEI crowd, making the challenges they're facing twofold. Even studios owned by tech juggernauts weren't immune to the industry's contractions. Microsoft shuttered Arcane Austin and Tango Gameworks. Sony shut down Firewalk. The latter shuttering wasn't wholly surprising. Its big 2024 release Concord was largely considered a flop, but having a hit didn't give any studios a safety net. Near universal acclaim for Tango's Hi-Fi Rush didn't stop Microsoft's axe. It did, though, however, give Tango just enough juice to be revived by a new buyer. In other words, it's been a dismal year for morale. When developers gathered in Los Angeles for June's Summer Games Fest, developer New Blood Interactive bought out a billboard solely to memorialize their fellow developers who'd lost their jobs. We love you, we miss you, we hate money. It's just so performative and disingenuous, and it hurts to read. That line about Black Myth, Balatro, and Astrobot, and how the success of those games couldn't distract from the trouble of the people that were making them. Those employees don't have any trouble. They're chilling. They're kicking it right now. They're working on the game that they already made, or they're working on the next game that they're going to make. Having a hit doesn't provide a safety net. Hi-Fi Rush was a game that had critical success, and I'm sorry, but writers, journalists, and reviewers, you don't matter if the game doesn't sell well. It was a niche game. It was great. I had a lot of fun playing it, but it released on Xbox and PC Game Pass, a game that was largely played for free under a subscription, and the only game that people liked that actually came from a studio that suffered a closure or layoff. We hate money? Yeah, it's obvious that they hate money. We've learned that by now. It's why they can't keep their employees or stay in business. They're making things for the sake of making them rather than making them for an audience. And that's fine, by the way, but there are consequences for that. And tell me, what is the purpose of sliding in these snide remarks about DEI like player reception isn't a part of this issue? This article's treatment of diversity and player criticism is a textbook example of bad faith argumentation. It dismisses legitimate concerns about poor writing, inauthentic representation, and shallow characters by highlighting some of the most extreme comments from a fringe minority, branding them as right-wing groups if they have any sort of criticism, chanting "go woke, go broke." This straw man tactic is a deliberate attempt to devalue the opinions of players who want better writing and characters that actually feel authentic. When they continue to focus on these inflammatory remarks, the industry avoids engaging with the real issue. Players are tired of being sold half-baked stories and poorly executed characters that are dressed up in the guise of progressive messaging. Sure, there are some weirdos that are on the internet, but there are also thoughtful conversations about these issues as well. These criticisms the players are raising aren't about rejecting diversity, it's about rejecting bad diversity, forced, one-dimensional, inauthentic characters and stories that are meant to meet their personal worldview rather than actually serve the narrative. Players want nuanced, well-developed characters like we've seen in so many successful games. Take a look around. there are plenty of games with plenty of diversity in some of the most successful games of 2024. These writers are living in their own universe at this point. They were spewing nonsense about how Black Myth Wukong wasn't including women when in fact the game was filled with female leads in the story. Space Marine 2 had a black amputee in Brother Chiron steal the show in the final leg of the campaign and some of the most badass moments of the whole damn game. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's Barrett was one of the best voice performances all year, and that game tackled deep issues with parenting, adoption, and PTSD. Metaphor ReFantasio's entire premise is around racism, prejudice, and more. What's even more glaring is that this article completely disregards the massive successes that we saw in indie games in 2024, which contradicts all of their doom and gloom. Titles like Palworld, Enshrouded, Plucky Squire, Animal Well, Pacific Drive, Crow Country, Mouthwashing, and Manalords not only thrived, but they captivated audiences. They found their own audience with their originality, their authenticity, and their focus on gameplay over scope. By ignoring these successes, player concerns, and why some of these studios actually shut down, this writer is doing nothing but painting an incomplete and ultimately a biased picture. They are so tied up in the virtue of their actions that they never take the time to think about the actions themselves. It's all about optics. It's all performative. It's nothing more. We have an entire industry that is so terrified, so absolutely terrified to just say that some people are bad at their fucking job. It's as simple as that. Your characters suck. The writing sucks. The premise sucks. The gameplay sucks. The writing is contrived and formulaic. We've seen it 1,000 times. When I played Dragon Age the Veilguard, it felt like I was watching a Netflix television show. You know, I'm going to rant now. I watched The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. I used to love Sabrina the Teenage Witch when I was a kid. Judge me, I don't really care. But in the show, they had this character that was a female to male trans, and they wanted to join the basketball team. They sucked. They were terrible. They couldn't hit a shot. They got ran out by all the guys, and they were only good when someone cast a spell on them. They pushed down one of the players on the team down a flight of stairs and almost killed the guy. It's supposed to be a wholesome story, a wholesome coming out story. That player that fell down the stairs couldn't remember anything, comes up to them on crutches and apologizes. What's the moral of the story? What are you even doing at this point? While that's TV and this is video games, it's the same trash, garbage level writing and character writing that players are trying to push back on. That's the reason why a lot of these players are voicing their concerns and trying to talk about it. And yeah, you're going to have some people that are out there, they're going to latch onto it, and they're going to be the hateful few that are out there, but you have folks with genuine concerns that you really need to pay attention to, because a lot of these games, a lot of this media is doing nothing but perpetuating negative stereotypes that's doing more harm to these minorities than good. We have people that are out there that want to be heroes of virtue but don't have the skill to execute on it. That needs to be called out. You have to call that out. Because if you don't, these problems only continue to get worse, and you end up making groups look worse as a result of that. Is that what you really want from this? Can we not sit back and point out how garbage Dragon Age the Veilguard is? We can't talk about how poorly executed a game like Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League, or how garbage the character designs for Concord is? We can't talk about those kind of things. How is the industry supposed to get better if you guys don't just take the gloves off every once in a while? And as a customer, that's what I expect, because I'm a gamer. I'm supposed to be coming to reviewers and writers for their expertise on these issues, but they don't want to talk about those kind of things. I want to talk. We all want to talk about the quality of these games, but we're just not allowed to because the industry just isn't interested in it. The writer concludes with, this year may have been the 10th anniversary of Gamergate, the 2014 online hate movement that shaped the internet harassment tactics apparent today. But online conversations felt like a trip back in time. Conservative ideologues bemoaned the inclusion of characters who did not fit the cookie-cutter image of a white, cis, hetero man. They complained that DEI was being forced upon them. It wasn't. In March, harassment towards a small consultancy agency called Sweet Baby Incorporated reached new heights as bad actors organized through Discord, Steam forums, and other online spaces. branding themselves as Gamergate 2.0. Online mobs harassed developers using tweets, DMs, YouTube videos, and Twitch streams. They targeted anyone with any connection to Sweet Baby and other consultancies, a fairly wide net as consultants are often brought on to advise on accuracy, sensitivity, and more. Their mission was fighting against wokeification. The realities of the economic issues impacting the games they love had no place in their tactics. The specter of diversity had more pull than analysts and experts. Games with black leads and characters were derided as forced. Female characters deemed unattractive or masculine were suffering from the DEI chin. Dragon Age the Veilguard was criticized by far-right trolls for its customization options, which allowed players to create characters with top surgery scars and play with a non-binary companion. After reviews were released, conspiracists latched on to cliche phrases and other language as proof that BioWare was instructing reviewers how to talk about their game. I am just so sick of seeing people rewrite history regarding Gamergate 2014. Journalists continue to this day to present it as nothing more than an online hate movement, ignoring that at its core, Gamergate was about ethics in journalism, a criticism of media outlets and their cozy, clearly visible relationships with developers and publishers. That message was quickly buried under straw man arguments highlighting the most extreme views possible, a minority, a vocal minority more than anything else, a tactic that conveniently allows them to deflect any accountability. This exact same strategy is on full display here, framing the criticisms of diversity, storytelling, and representation in game as far-right trolling while avoiding legitimate concerns about the quality and authenticity of the work that's being delivered. I can't believe that they would bring up Gamergate 2014 in the same breath as Dragon Age the Veilguard. Yeah, let's call the customers conspiracy theorists when we know that reviewers that were critical of the game didn't receive review codes. When every reviewer that scored the game an 8 or a 9, well, their review sounded like the game was more like a 10. Each one of them saying a return to form for BioWare, while the product that was delivered to the customers didn't meet the expectations that were set by those reviews. While I don't think that BioWare told reviewers what to say, they definitely controlled who got it first, and the people who got it first were those who are desperate to make sure that one of these games win, and they will do anything and say anything to make that happen. I will never forget Jason Schreier going on Twitter to gloat about Dragon Age the Veilguard, saying, "Go woke, go top the charts," only to say in the comments that he doesn't even like the game, he just likes seeing the chuds get dunked on. Of course, he would later then remove this entire post when it was revealed that the game wasn't a success. Look, I'm not going to pretend like the trolling or extremist positions don't exist. I know it's real. I see it all the time. I see it every single day. I see it in the comment sections of videos and live streams. I see weirdos on social media that are sharing images of what underwear Eve from Stellar Blade would wear versus the character from Naughty Dog's Intergalactic. I see how hard people will sometimes reach on Twitter to find issues with something that just aren't there, just to try to keep the hate train moving. But at the end of the day, the only reason why those groups find any traction is because there are real issues in the industry today that add fuel to that fire. And ignoring them or pretending like the house isn't burning down around you isn't going to help these studios and keep them from closing or keep these games from failing or help people keep their jobs. Take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Why did some of these games fail? Why were people criticizing Sweet Baby Incorporated? Why were these games so fundamentally flawed? You know, my first thought when I saw the whole Sweet Baby Incorporated drama come up was not about the consultancy agency itself. It was about why companies developing narrative-driven games would even need to outsource parts of their story to an external agency in the first place. That's the real issue. Let's do a root cause analysis here. We have studios right now that are burning through hundreds of millions of dollars on bloated, overscope projects. Those same studios are overstaffed, leading to layers upon layers of management that are trying to oversee these massive teams. The more management you introduce, the more diluted the vision of the company and the game becomes, and the harder it is to be able to make clear, decisive calls. It's a classic case of too many cooks in the kitchen. With deadlines looming and budgets spiraling out of control, studios find themselves scrambling to complete unfinished parts of their game. To meet those deadlines, they then bring in external agencies to share the workload. The result, a game that barely has any cohesive identity because it's been put through so many hands. It has no unifying vision to be able to tie it together. Add in an outside consultant who's unfamiliar with the heart of the project, and it's like playing a game of telephone. Every step introduces more miscommunication and disconnection, all driven by overscoping, mismanagement, and unchecked egos at the top. Of course, these games were destined to fail, but we aren't talking about that, and these writers aren't interested in looking into it. The truth is, none of this is going to stop, and it's not going to stop until a lot of these companies start going out of business, and basically, that's it. Because at the end of the day, it goes back to what I was saying before, that you have people that are out there that are so caught up in the virtue of their actions that are not actually thinking about their actions. They will say a lot of things, but they won't think about what they're saying. Like, as an example, you're going to have a lot of folks that are out there that'll say, I want diversity in video games. Full stop. That's it. Because isn't that just the most virtuous thing to say? I say I want diversity in games because I want a diversity in perspectives. I want shared experiences. I want something that is maybe going to change the way that I view the world, or maybe help me empathize with people that I've never understood before, because I've had games that have done that for me in the past. I think one of the best examples of this is Warframe, actually. They have this entire quest line that is about an autistic character, and I never understood the perspective of somebody that was autistic until I played that game and played that mission, and then now I understand far better than I ever have before, more than I've ever seen on a television show or read in an article or anything like that. And it's important to keep grounded. There's a fundamental difference there in the authenticity and what you actually want. You know, going into 2025, I decided that I wanted to deliver better content to my viewers, because that's what my viewers deserve. They're the ones that support me, and without them, I'm nothing. And when I read an article like this, I realize that that's just not what this industry is interested in. They have this weird relationship between the two of them where they keep, you know, the media covers the industry, but now I'm realizing it's more like they cover for the industry, not actually covering what's going on in the industry. They care a lot more about each other than the people that actually keep them in business in the first place. And that's their fundamental flaw. You have to respect where the money comes from, because without us, you're nothing. And nothing's really going to change. And a lot of these companies are just going to go out of business, and out of their ashes, well, new titans will rise. You know, alternative media, YouTube, Twitch streaming. You have people that are on X that are posting some stuff as well, or Twitter, sorry, but I don't really care what people call it, to be honest with you. But, you know, journalists are going to be the ones that are going out of style. You have indie developers that are starting to take rise, AA and AAA games that have been taking over the industry over the last couple of years. Some of the best games that we've been delivered have not come from the biggest companies that are out there. And what do you think is going to be the end result of that? They're going to go out of business, and the new guys are going to take over. And to be honest with you, I'm looking forward to that, because the new guys make some pretty damn good games. You know, you have to have a balance between doing something that you want and making sure that you're also doing something for the people that are actually keeping you in check, the people that are actually paying you in the first place. And that's where this industry is starting to veer off course. You have to stop looking at everybody else and start looking in the mirror from time to time, because these two, like the media and game developers, just keep patting each other on the back and not listening to the players, and we're the ones with the wallets, and just not going to work out for you. I don't know what else to say. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I have a head cold, so I have a really hard time hearing myself right now, which has made it really hard for me to like script read as well as do this stuff. So hopefully I didn't sound weird or anything like that. Anyway, stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe. I need to get back to playing Path of Exile 2. Peace.
Family, 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 family.